We do not choose our destiny. Instead, we choose our habits, and our habits choose our destiny. This week, I really want to talk about the idea that the lives we have created, the results that we have produced in the world, are because of our unconscious habits. Our habits are those choices and thoughts that we've made repeatedly until they become automatic. It's how we get to where we've gotten in our lives. It's how we've created every result we have. So today, this idea we need to change our habit loop. If we want to create new futures, if we want to transform our lives and create the results that we actually want, we have to change the unconscious habits that got us here in the first place. And the truth is, most people, I think, on this planet spend most of their lives living completely automatically, completely unconsciously, at the effect of all of those habits. And that's perfectly understandable. Having this idea where we can have a trigger, generate a response, and get a reward is incredibly powerful. It helps us free up brain space for real thinking. It helps us achieve lots of the unconscious things we do every day, like knowing how to walk or stand up, knowing how to write our name, knowing how to brush our teeth, knowing how to drive. I wonder how many of you have ever gotten in the car and then suddenly arrived at your destination. Not really sure how you got there. Or perhaps you find yourself waking up halfway through doing something or eating something going, why am I here? If you've ever experienced that, you can see that that is our unconscious habit loops in action in the moment. Because the truth is, once we've made a decision and we've practiced a response enough times, it does actually become unconscious. There are a number of different parts in our brain. There's our cognitive prefrontal cortex. That's our most recently evolved part of our brain. It's the really thinking part of our brain that holds our hopes and our dreams and our desires. That's where our long-term goals for our healthy life live. Trouble is, we also have this more primitive part of our brain sitting just on the top of our brain stem and underneath that thinking brain. And that's our primitive brain. It's our emotional system, our limbic system, and includes a structure called the basal ganglia, which is where we store our muscle memory. It's why you can walk around without having to think about how to do it. It's why you can get in a car and arrive without knowing how you got there. That's that system at work. And research shows that when we have practiced a choice, a decision, a response to a trigger enough times to make it a habit, the thinking brain actually doesn't light up. So when we want to change it, we do actually have to get our awareness, get our thinking brain back online. Because our primitive brain isn't thinking about our goals, our dreams, our desires. It isn't thinking about the end result. Our primitive brain only cares about survival in the moment. It really is like a toddler. It's like, I want it and I want it now. It wants an immediate resolution to whatever happens to be coming up, to whatever the trigger happened to be. So let me just break this down for you. Every habit we have, there is a trigger, a thing that sets the brain going, ooh, here's that thing again. I need to solve it. And what it wants to do is it looks back in our past and says, is there a way I've solved this before that worked? And if there is, it just keeps it. It just runs that same program automatically. It doesn't even have to get into thinking, which is how we find ourselves falling back into old unhealthy habits when we're tired or when we're stressed or when we're really not paying attention because our brain is just running automatically. Our primitive brain always keeps us stuck where we are. It always keeps us perpetuating the same sorts of outcomes we've already created. So once again, if we do want to create something new, we have to break this unconscious loop, right? The trigger is going to be the same because things will still happen in our life. So we're going to keep the trigger. We just want to become aware of it, first of all. So how do you do that? Well, one great way to do that is actually to notice and write down every time you perform an unhealthy habit. Now, most of us have lots of those. I'm not sure if you know, but there are hundreds of habits that we practice every day. Some estimates put it up near 1,000. And not all of them are bad. Most of them are very helpful. But when we are not living a healthy life, when we have unhelpful or sabotaging habits, those are ones that we do have to take notice of. We have to get conscious of. So my first step is to write it down and be aware that your trigger will usually fall into one of 5 categories. It will either be a location. Oh, I always have this at the coffee shop, at this restaurant, at my friend's house, at the kitchen table. So as a location, it might be a time. I wonder how many of you have ever noticed that, oh, I'm not really hungry at all. You look at the clock. Ooh, time for morning tea. And then suddenly you're hungry because the time. So is it the location or the time? Is it your emotional state? That's the number 3. So write down how you're feeling at the time you undertook the unhealthy habit. Is it the circumstance? Is it the situation you find yourself in? Often, this is where the people around us have a big impact on the kinds of choices we make. It's well known that if we have friends around us or people who are saboteurs or who have unhealthy habits, we'll be more likely to pick up and keep those healthy habits. You know, we always want to be part of the tribe. So be aware of that. Is it the circumstances? Is it that situation I find myself? So that's number 4. Or number 5 is it's an immediately preceding event. Whenever I make myself a coffee, I reach for the biscuit barrel. Do I have to have coffee and? It's an association we've made between 2 things. Okay. When I'm sitting down on a plate of food, I have to finish everything on my plate. So step 1, identify the trigger. Take note of what's actually going on in all of those areas: location, time, emotional state, the actual circumstance, and what you've just finished. Write those down. It will really help you identify your triggers and get conscious again. We also have to bring an awareness about our response. As I said, there's hundreds of habits we practice a day. So you don't have to judge yourself for making an unhealthy choice. You don't have to think it's bad or terrible, you've done something wrong. At this stage, when you're first learning to change it, just become aware of it. Just notice it. And once again, I urge you to write it down. In fact, I'm going to encourage everyone to do some homework this week. And actually, whenever you watch this video, take the next 24 hours or the next 7 days and write down every unhealthy choice you make. If you want to get super aware, write down every habit you notice in your day. That's a lot. But if we just want to change the unhealthy ones, write them down, note them. What was the trigger and how did you respond? And try and write down your response in as much detail as possible. I went to the cupboard. I reached to the shelf where the biscuit barrel was. I took the lid off. I reached in, meaning to take 1 cookie and came out with 2. I kept both of those cookies and ate them with my coffee. I left the biscuit barrel open on the bench and came back after my coffee and grabbed another one before putting it away. I came back after dinner and finished the last couple of bites, or took another couple of bites from the pan from the leftovers before I put them away, right? Get as detailed as possible about what the actual response was. So we've got the trigger and a response. Of course, we've kept it by having a reward. Now, in most cases, the reward is going to be a little hit of dopamine. That's the feel-good chemical in our brain. And so when we have a trigger, a response, and a reward, when you actually complete this loop, that little hint of dopamine, that little feel-good moment, that short-term, solution to the situation, that little feel-good moment tells our brain, oh, that was the right response to that trigger. Let's do it again. And so it's going to look to do the same sorts of things in the same circumstances. Do you ever find that you're going along all good, and then a particular circumstance or a particular feeling will come up, and then you find yourself falling back into old habits? That's all that's at play here, that your unconscious habit loop is just kicking in. So far, we've talked about identifying the trigger. You might also want to think about what the reward is. Is it about solving boredom? Do you need a distraction? Are you trying to avoid feeling a feeling? Are you looking for stimulation? Are you actually trying to solve hunger? Are you looking for social engagement? Are you looking for your status? Are you looking to reinforce your position or to get acknowledgement from others? There can be lots of different reasons why we do things, but pay attention to what kind of reward it is, because that might help you in choosing new responses, which is ultimately what we need to do, right? So to change, we're going to keep the trigger, because that's still going to happen in life. We're going to plan in a new response. That's the next stage. You actually have to plan out, what is the new response I will do instead? And then think about, did that response give me the reward? Or if not, how will I give me the reward? So for instance, sometimes this is how we can just acknowledge ourselves. We can give ourselves a pat on the back for showing up and making a better choice. Have you ever noticed how amazing it feels to actually show up on your own behalf, to make a choice that is aligned with your goals and your dreams and your values? You know, those times when you've politely declined the social pressure to drink or to overeat. Those times when you've stopped when you're satisfied and left food on the plate, despite the urge to finish it all. All those times when you say yes to you. It feels amazing. And I encourage you to practice experiencing it. Give yourself that little acknowledgement, that little reward, just to say, hey, I looked after me. That can be enough. It doesn't have to be a particular thing. Just that feel-good moment, that moment of acknowledgement is all we really need. So here's my advice. Once you've got your list of unhelpful habits, and you've identified the triggers, the kind of rewards you were looking for, and in detail what the response was, you've got your trigger, your response, and your reward, all we're going to change is design out the new response. What else could solve the actual issue in a healthier way? What actually moves me towards my goals and my hopes and my dreams instead? Write it out. And the way I like you to write it out is, when this trigger happens, I will practice the new reward. Oh, sorry, I said that wrong. Practice the new response. When trigger, I will practice this new response in as much detail as I can, and then I will have the reward. When trigger, I will new response, then I will have reward. Try and write it out in this format. When I'm having a coffee at 11:30, I will go directly to the kitchen table instead of the cupboard, and I will sit down. I'll remind myself that I do not need to eat at all. And I'll enjoy my coffee and relax and take a moment to really reflect on how great it feels not to be overeating cookies just because it's morning tea. One example. Try and make it as detailed as possible. It might sound a little silly when you're first starting it. It might sound a little pedantic. But as you start to practice it and do it again and again and again, you start to retrain your brain. Remember that primitive part of your brain doesn't want to let go of the old habits. And in fact, you can't actually let go of them. The basal ganglia stores them, and in short of brain injury, you will actually keep those habits forever. So what you have to do is practice the new habit, the new response to that trigger, enough times that those new neural connections in our brain, those new neural pathways are practiced enough that they become efficient enough that that becomes the default pathway. And the other ones, it's a bit like filing something away in a cupboard or in a drawer that you kind of forget about in a room you never go into. And that just, you kind of forget it's there. It is still there, but you kind of forget about it because you're using the things that are immediately around you. Does that make sense? Use this technique. I really encourage you to give it a try. Really practice it. Let's finish up with a couple of ideas. Look, I believe in creating a healthy life is about creating habits that nourish us, not restrictions that punish. So make it about joy and make it about success. I want to leave you with these thoughts that, yes, it can be hard to train in new habits, but there are no shortcuts. None. And what I've learned from practicing the skill, purposefully choosing one new habit and retraining it, practicing it enough times till it becomes automatic, then we have effortless freedom to maintain our success long term because it's the default way our body responds. It's tremendously exciting, and I think that value is priceless. So feel free to share with us in the comments what habits have you noticed that you'd like to change, make a decision, and perhaps write out what is the new habit that you're going to be practicing in the week ahead. I wish you every success with it, and I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you want more help transitioning into the life that you want to be living, rather than the life that you have, then remember, you can always sign up for a free exploratory coaching session with me on my website. Go to livemorelife.com.au and click on Free Exploratory Session. Fill in the form and I'll be in touch to help you out. Talk to you soon.